So this is where we left off from yesterday, right? And of course the video's up for that. So really we just dropped in our default cube, right? We kind of did our default, kind of when you do a new scene, it gives you those options. You pick general, and that just drops a cube in there. You know, of course I went to the modeling layout because I like it to be more focused on the modeling tools. And of course I do like to create a new collection, right? Remember you can just put your cursor in Outliner, right click, new collection, and you could just then drag and drop like the light and the camera into the collection and then just turn its eyeball off, right, in the outliner. And that way you still have your camera and your light, but you can kind of have them not be visible, right? Remember you can name stuff, right? So if I go to the cube here, I could double click it and we can call it quad body. Just keep it short, right? But it's quadruped. And it was really just a cube. I showed once again the auto mirror, right? Remember you have these great little tools here if you need them, right? Things like the mesh tools and loop tools, auto mirror. These are add-ons you can turn on, right? Remember, edit preferences, add-on. You can go find them, check them on. These are ones that come with it. So just kind of reminding you guys about that. And auto mirror makes it nice so that you just kind of turn on a few things, like usually editable, toggle edit kind of stuff. And then you just hit auto mirror, pick your access. And it automatically deletes half of it and mirrors it over. So it's kind of a nice little add-on that you just check on in add-ons to do that. Otherwise, you just kind of put an edge loop down the center yourself, manual with loop cut, delete half of it, and then of course apply a mirror modifier, right? Which actually the auto mirror does, right? So it's just kind of automating a few of those steps. So it's kind of a neat little add-on, right? Comes with Blender, you don't have to find it. And then I just went in and I did some more loop cuts, right? So we had a little more geometry to work with for shaping. And then we just extruded off some limbs, right? And you can kind of see that gave us, at this point, kind of enough to start to work from. Now, of course, remember, you can be using your tweak tool. I have quick keys assigned to it, right? I have with 5-button mouses here. I have one at home. And you can assign pretty much any tool to those extra mouse buttons. So I have things like my tweak and my circle select set to mouse buttons. But remember, Q toggles through those, right? Q toggles through those. If you hold down left mouse button on the tool, you'll see it gives you those options right there as well. So remember, that's Q though. So if I hit W for move and then I hit Q, it goes back to the tweak tool. And that's just going to allow you, whatever selection type you're in, 2 for edge mode. You could bring this edge in more, that edge in a little bit more if you wanted to. Of course, as you go, you can add more edge loops for shaping. Keep in mind that we are using a subdivision modifier, right? We did add that. We went to add modifier, subdivision surface. We like to make sure to turn that on so we can actually see, not have the control cage on. You will see, though, that if we were shaping it for this and then we got rid of it without applying it, the low res would look like garbage, right? So remember, one of the biggest rules I have if you're going to use a subdivision modifier is that you're going to actually not get rid of it. You're going to eventually apply it, so it will look like this and have more geometry. We're using it as a shortcut so that we don't have to add in all of the edge loops to get this nice and rounded looking ourselves. Remember, you can go here for statistics, right? And that'll show you your count right there. If you do go 4 for object mode, you'll get a better count of the exact triangles for the whole object. This is 1,000 triangles. Quite frankly, that'll work in just about any pipeline that exists right now. It's, believe it or not, polygon counts matter still, but not as much as they used to. We're now a few months into the PlayStation 5 era, right? The Xbox Series X era. And what we can do with polygon counts now is a lot higher than 1,000 triangles. So that's why it's okay for us to use the subdivision surface modifier, because even if we apply it twice, which we will on this guy, his body will maybe be 15,000 triangles. And that'll work in just about any pipeline, period. Any studio, definitely movies, but even most video game studios, that will work. So we're just using this subdivision surface modifier to save ourselves some time, right? Instead of having to add in every edge by hand and do a lot of shaping by hand, or just, sculpt it a lot and then manually retop it, which can take time, or rely on iffy automated retopologies and tools, we're going to box model as much as we can, use the subdivision surface modifier as much as we can. Now you see I can go in here and I can do some cool little tweaks to get some kind of better shape for some of this stuff, right? So we can kind of get that leg in a bit better position there. I do want a little bit more for this kind of foot, so I'm going to go to 3 for face mode. Select that face there, and of course we can hit Control E for extrude. Bring that out a little bit. Remember, middle mouse button will allow you to just view extrude. If you grab the yellow handle, it'll do it along the average normal. Whereas the kind of outside of this, the circle, you'll see is extrude region, right? So believe it or not, this is kind of your view extrusion. But middle mouse button does it also. So we can hit E for rotate, of course, right? E for rotate. Remember, the tools are right here, though. Right? So your selection tools there with tweak, of course. And your move, rotate scales are here. But, of course, middle mouse button can do view rotate. And so we can easily just start to get that a little bit more in there. And I'm going to go back to my tweak tool. Because tweak's great in the sense that you can just grab and move at the same time. Right? That's what's really cool about it, is the moment you select is also it's moving it. So it's doing both at the same time. That saves you time. Instead of having to select and then grab a key, grab a handle or something like that, or use another quick key. It's just really fast. So particularly for character creatures, tweak is just really awesome. A great fast way to do minor little shape changes where you need them to be. So you see I'm just kind of using this extrusion to build appendages. A lot of you guys remember this from the crab, right, that we made earlier. That's because the extrude tool is built. It's designed to make appendages, guys. The extrude tool, that's its purpose, right? So if you're ever wanting to box model, and that's what we call this method, right, because it started as a box, and we added some edge loops to it and extruded, and all of a sudden it's a lot more than a box. But this method is often called box or branch modeling. Now, we will do some form sculpting, some primary form sculpting on certain parts of this creature and retopo that. But you can quickly and easily, particularly in a great, easy-to-use software like Blender, block in your primary big shapes and your most important edge loops with box modeling and get great shaping with these tools. And then when you run into the area where you're not sure how you box model that, that's when we can sculpt and retopo. And that's what we're going to do with this. We're going to build a majority of it box modeling, and then the areas that we want to apply some primary form sculpting and retopologizing, we'll do that. That'll obviously be a little later on. But we can see that we can start to easily get this little blocking going here, right? So we're really just kind of seeing a bit going on there. There we go. Remember, you can switch to your different selection types, 1, 2, and 3, and your tweak tool stays on, right? So that will make it pretty easy just to kind of go back and forth between your different selection types as you're tweaking to get a little bit more of the shape. Now, of course, one of the things we might want to do with this is say, hey, I want to maybe adjust the size. We're going to do a little bit more modeling on this, of course, but shaping is important to this as well, right? You notice how I've got kind of the chest here, kind of the rib cage area for this animal, a bit more sticking out than the kind of the back area here. Look at animals. That's the way that anatomy works. See how there's a bit of curvature to the spine? You see how from the top, kind of usually the centers can be, unless it's a tubby animal, right? It'll thin out here a little bit. You notice how the legs aren't exactly straight. They kind of have a bit of that arch backwards. And in particular here, we're kind of going with that dog leg form, right? Believe it or not, dogs and cats, their rear legs, actually all their legs, but it's most apparent on their rear legs, they're actually standing on the balls of their feet. So what's happening is that it's kind of like my students here could see it. I can't really show it online, but just stand on the balls of your feet, and that's what a cat and dog are doing with their rear legs. And so that whole third segment of the leg is actually just a lengthened foot. But what that does is now you have 3 bends that can allow more kind of kinetic energy to be stored up, so they can jump further. Because, humans have big brains, but in terms of other anatomy, other animals kind of are better. A cat or dog's like, I can jump a lot further. I got claws. Cats are like, my claws even retract. But basically, that's kind of the anatomy structure you want to think about, right? That's why we kind of just made this like a foot. That would actually be the way you would make a human foot. You would just shape it to not be on the balls of its foot, right? So kind of those little things like that we can do even at this stage if we want to. Like I can go here, Alt-C for loop cut, and I can put a little edge loop in here. Remember, when you left-click drag, it allows you to slide that edge loop in there. Whereas if you just left-click, it puts it right in the middle, which when you get used to that, actually is awesome. I love that in Blender. So remember, Alt-C for loop cut. And then, of course, we can go back to, say, our selection tool, 3 for face. Grab that front face there. Control-E for extrusion, extrude that out a little bit. Remember, I'm just using the middle mouse button to do that view extrude, because for a character creature, that's going to be fine. You notice how this foot seems a little small? Don't freak out if you extrude and the shape is small. The extrusion worked, you just need to be more shape it more, right? It's just a small shape, right? So you see how I can kind of pull that up to get a little bit more of kind of our foot shape there? You see why I like having the tweak tool on by default? Because unless you really need you select multiple things or rotate or scale, the tweak's actually just going to serve you quite well. So now we can see we've got that foot there. And of course, we can bring a little more shaping in there. But what if I wanted to kind of lengthen this whole body here, right? Well, I could hit Q to toggle back to my box selection tool. And I could just select all these faces. You'll notice, though, sometimes it doesn't get everything, because by default, the selection tools are ignoring back faces. So, if you did want to quickly and easily do that, you could hit Alt-X for X-ray, and then you'll see with X-ray, it will grab everything. So remember, Alt-X is your X-ray. It's right here, though, but there's a quick key for it. And that gives you the ability to fully kind of select through everything, right? Because you'll often notice it won't necessarily grab everything if it's the regular box select, because it can't see all the polygons. So X-ray is a great way to kind of be able to select everything, right? There is another way, though. If I was to go to 2 for edge mode, and I was to double left click, right? Because we know double left click allows us to select edge loops. So if I was to double left click here, that selects that whole edge loop, right? There is a tool in Blender, if you go to the select loops, that's called select loop inner region. I have a quick key setup to this, because this is actually an awesome tool, particularly when you're working on arms and legs and you don't always want to X-ray select. So if you actually go to select loop inner region, you don't have to use this, right? Regular rectangle select will work well enough. But you'll see what it does is it actually selects the side that has less geometry. So as long as you select an edge loop, it'll look at both sides of that edge loop, right? The polygons on one side, the polygons on the other side. And the side that has less polygons, it'll select those. So this can actually be a great fast way to select arms, legs. It's a really, really cool feature. I wish Maya had it. Moto's had it forever, though. And Blender has it too, right? Select loop inner region. And we can just hit W for move. And I can just stretch this out a little bit, right? If I wanted to, I could always hit R for scale it out a little bit if I wanted it to be a little bit bigger. Maybe make it a little wider there. And you see, in this case, I did hit W for move, and I'm using the middle mouse button to do the view move. But you see how I was able to kind of just adjust this guy's shape a little bit. So remember, it's very easy to keep adjusting and playing with shape as you go along. Just select what you want to move, shape, or scale to make that a little bit bigger. And now we can see we've got a little more there. In this case, I might even want an extra edge loop here, so Alt-C for loop cut. There we go. And then maybe a double left click here. W for move. Maybe scale that out a little bit. R for scale. Middle mouse button for uniform scale. Maybe W for move. And you see we can make some of these great little extra adjustments as we work. Keep in mind, though, that we don't want to add a million edge loops to this body for this character creature, right? We are, early on, actually going to apply this subdivisional modifier, right? So we actually are going to pretty early on. Probably not today. I'll probably wait for Thursday to do that, because we can still get the head and kind of the main horn shape on here without getting all the fingers, toes. In this case, toes, right? Because it's a quadruped, so it'll be all toes, just like it's all legs. And, we're not going to put our radial patterns for our eyes and mouths on yet. But early on, we will actually apply the subdivisional surface modifier so that our low res will already start to look pretty decent, and we'll have more geometry to work with. So one of the big things is don't add like 20 edge loops to a leg right now, right? Don't add 20 edge loops to a body. Just don't do that. Let the subdivisional surface get you the nice kind of form that you want, right? Also remember, if you need to, and you want to use some reference images, remember you can go to, I think we have to be in object mode though, 4 for object mode. And if you go to add, you'll see there's an image, reference image, right? So you can actually drop in a reference image so that you can use that, right? Oftentimes you'll want to kind of pick a side, right? And there are actually quick keys for these different views, but I just spend a lot of time working perspective mode, so I just boom, hit those. You'll notice if you set it to kind of one of these guys, you see how it kind of sets those to kind of the side views, right? And you can go to add, image, reference, and then you'll find a picture, right, to load in there. So let's load that. And then you'll see there's actually an object in here that we can scale, move around. Alt left mouse button to rotate, right? So you can just use your normal navigation to do this stuff again. And you see how you can load a reference picture in? And it's still an object. If you don't want it, you can just hit delete, right? If you're building your own creature out of your mind, you can kind of just design it. But remember, if you go to 4 for object mode, add, image, reference image, it'll actually ask you to pick a picture. So it could be like a rhino from the side, or just something as reference if you want to have something for anatomy reference. So remember, even if you're designing your own thing, you can always use reference, right? If you want to. I've built enough stuff that I'll just kind of build it out of my head. But reference can always be useful, right? And it's quite easy to add in Blender, and from the different views and all that stuff. And you can put as many as you want in, move, rotate, and scale work with them like normal objects. So I figured it'd be good just to kind of remind you guys you could do that, right, if you want to take advantage of it. In this case, I'm going to go to 3 for face mode. Remember, you could use circle select, right? Q will toggle through, but it's the actual one of these here that's a circle. And remember, what circle select does is you hold down your left mouse button, you just move your cursor, and whatever it touches, it selects, right? So there we go. Control will deselect for those, whereas with the tweak tool, you have to use shift to deselect, which is fine once you get used to it. Control will actually work for edge loops and circle select. So sometimes control works for certain selection tools for deselecting. Sometimes it's shift. It depends on the tool. But I can grab those. Remember, clipping is on, particularly for characters, creatures. Clipping, actually all kinds of symmetrical modeling things. Clipping is great. So Control E, middle mouse button to extrude. There we go. And see how it kind of keeps that all lined up together. There's no geometry inside of there. I'm going to hit R for scale, and then middle mouse button. E for rotate, then middle mouse button. You, of course, always can grab the handles. Remember, rotate in particular, if you grab it here in the center, it'll do a full trackball. You can just kind of, right? But view rotate I find pretty awesome. I use view rotate, view move, and the kind of that uniform scale all the time with middle mouse button. R for scale again, bring that down a little bit. Control E for another extrusion, and then I'll probably do a second one there. So remember, you just keep hitting the mouse button, I'll keep doing extrusions. E for rotate. And then, of course, if I want to, I can come in here and do some tweaks. 2 for edge, and I can tweak some of these edges down a little bit. And we can easily just start to kind of shape and get the head out for this guy. Now, in this case, we could always keep adjusting the shapes and forms, but I feel like at this point I want to start to make the horn. So I'm going to maybe bring these guys out a little bit more, maybe bring these back in a little bit more. There we go. I'm going to go 3 for face, grab that face. So I'm going to make like a rhino kind of character. Control E, middle mouse button again, maybe a little bit of a rotate, E for rotate, middle mouse button, R for scale, middle mouse button, right? Because you see how middle mouse button for the scale tool does that uniform scale. W for move, middle mouse button. Remember, for the move tool, W, right? Middle mouse button does view move. And then Control E to kind of get the last bit of the horn here. E for rotate, middle mouse button. So you see how I'm making sure to rotate it a bit so it bends, right? Remember, bending the shape so that it kind of follows the contour is important. And then, of course, I go back to my tweak tool. Maybe 2 for edges, and I can start to kind of tweak some of these edges to get a little bit better shape for us. There we go. But you see how a horn is really just an appendage, right? So once again, extrusion's going to serve you well. I might find that I want this kind of, because it's got a larger head, I might want this kind of chest here a bit thicker and bigger, right? Oftentimes you want kind of that bigger rib cage chest to be able to hold that up, right? Maybe a little bit more powerful front leg, thigh area there. So we could easily just start to come in here and just with our tweak tool, really kind of develop these shapes a bit more. To kind of pull that form out a little bit better, right? We don't have to get all of our shaping done right now, right? But we're just trying to kind of make sure to have enough so we can start to get kind of a creature that's got a decent bit of kind of power and form to it. So I'm kind of going more for a rhino because that's going to provide me a lot of cool sculpting opportunities with stencils for you guys later on and stamps. But I think that'll be a great place to stop. So really, we're still kind of doing similar things, right? We're just adding some loop cuts here and there. We're doing some extrusions to build the horn in the kind of head area. And we're just doing some tweaking of shape, right, with our tweak tools, our move, rotate, scale tools. But you notice because the horn kind of arches back, we kind of made sure to have the edge loops kind of arch back too. They kind of rotate and bend to follow that shape, much like the leg, the rear leg does, right? So kind of when we get to here, it kind of bends around. So you want to make sure that there's rotations there so that the edge loops are kind of rotating and bending to follow that contour of the edge loop structure. So just kind of a little bit more of that functioning that we wanted. We'll be able to refine these shapes a bit more when we do our subdivision, but we're not going to quite do that today. All right. So that'll be a great place, I think, to stop for today. But you see how you can get quite a bit of the major stuff and major shapes without a lot, right? Particularly with the subdivisional surface modifier. All right. So I'm going to stop recording.